In a recent interview with CNBC's John Harwood, Senator Bernie Sanders laid out a couple of policy proposals on what he would do or try to push for if he was elected president. So, on the subject of taxes and income inequality, Harwood brought up the notion that, he brought up the idea that some have likened his efforts to fight income inequality with, by raising taxes, with Nazi Germany. First of all, I love that comparison because it's nonsensical to the core and it reeks of desperation. I can't come up with a good argument, so Nazis, Hitler. Dude, what the fuck? What does that even mean? Like, how is that even... Unless the tax man, unless the IRS agents are chasing down rich people and murdering them in the street, you have no comparison to Nazi Germany. None. So shut the fuck up. I'm tired of hearing that. That is ridiculous. It is not Nazi Germany. Just shut up, okay? Now, Sanders, in response to this, he was like, oh my God, okay, whatever. That radical socialist Dwight D. Eisenhower was president. I think the highest marginal tax rate was something like 90%. So 90%. Now, that was not the effective rate. The effective rate, when tax rates were super high, that doesn't mean that everybody always paid that. Well, I mean, taxes on the wealthy were high. It doesn't mean all the wealthy people paid that. There was always loopholes, so some of them would pay somewhere around 50 to 60%, 50 to 70, within that range, historically. Nonetheless, that's much higher than our effective rate that we have now. Our regular rate is 39%. Now, our effective rate, as we've seen with a lot of companies getting refunds, some companies don't pay any taxes at all and get refunds. And some pay very, very low tax rates, somewhere around even 12% normally. So the idea that any company is actually paid 90%, it's not quite accurate, even if the rate is set at 90%. And realistically, if we were to do something similar, there would obviously be loopholes and deductions and stuff, and their effective rate would not be 90%, it would be somewhere around 70%. And that's just looking at historical trends. Nonetheless, it'd be a good idea. Now, how Harwood followed this question up by asking, well, when you think about something like 90%, you don't think that's too high? Sanders basically said, no, not at all. I don't think it's too high. What I think is obscene, and I love this, when you have the top 1/10 of 1% owning as much as the bottom 90%, I'll go a step further. The recovery, and I'm sure he's addressed this before. In the recovery, the top 1%, especially the top 0.1%, received 100% of all of the income gains, effective income gains, since the end of the recession. 100%. All going to the very, very top. That is a large transfer of wealth from you and I, and from every working person in America to the very wealthiest corporations and billionaires in America. That is obscene. Absolutely obscene. Sanders is right. Now, let's go to, of course, how Republicans view this proposal or would view high taxes on the wealthy. Of course they would hate it. Immediately, I mean, you saw Nazi Germany. Oh, it's Nazi Germany. They're coming after my wealth. Oh, for fuck's sake. Once again, once you have to invoke Nazi Germany and nobody's getting gassed, you really can't use that analogy. You can't. Nobody's being murdered in the streets. Nobody's being rounded up in a concentration camp. It's just asking you to pay a little bit more, especially since you got 100% of all the income gains since the end of the recession. And we presided over the largest transfer of wealth in the starting in 1970s, 1980s, the Reagan administration, the largest transfer of the wealth from the middle class and the poor to the very, very wealthiest Americans. When you look at that, when you realize that, you start to think that a 90% tax, well, that's just giving back what they took from us, the middle class and the poor. All of that wealth that should have been more evenly distributed, that we lost in the recession after those billionaires, those very same billionaires, and top 1%, 0.1%, the bankers, Jamie Dimon, crashed the goddamn economy. That is a large transfer of wealth. All Bernie Sanders is doing is asking for some of that back. And I don't really think that's too bad of an idea. And to the Republicans that are like, oh my God, you're going to blow up the economy. That's it. America's done. We're doing 90%. You're crazy. Well, it turns out economists, last year, some economists found out the point at which the top tax rate is high enough to maximize government revenue, but not so high that it discourages wealthy people from trying to earn more. That's the argument that you hear all the time. Well, if you tax people too high, why would they work? Why would they just try to get more money? Why would they even do business? Well, just because they're taking a large percentage of what you're earning. And if you're earning $10 million a year and they're taking 5 to 8 million, you still have a couple million in profit that you get to keep and take home. That's still pretty damn good. And how would that discourage you? Oh, I'm only getting 2 million, so you know what? I'm just not even going to try anymore. No, that's stupid. You're always going to try and go for more. And that's fine. That's what encourages growth. You want to work harder to increase your share of revenue. Exactly. That and knowing that, these economists said, well, for the 1%, if you're taxed at 95%, that is at the point of where it's not worth it anymore. Now, Sanders is asking for 90%. And realistically, I doubt it would even get that high, even under Sanders in a progressive administration. But nonetheless, there's that data. And economists have also pointed out that in post-war America, growth has been higher during periods with much higher marginal tax rates and lower when tax rates were substantially lower. And we've seen that. We have seen lower growth since Reagan. We had some higher growth during Clinton, but even he wasn't crazy with the tax rates. Because Clinton was a centrist. He was a third way and quite corporatist, as are many of our politicians. The Republicans much more so, but Democrats often being a little bit less corporatist than Republicans generally are. And so that's why we haven't seen that kind of growth that we should see. And of course, our infrastructure is falling apart. Our child mortality rates are higher than they should be in the developed world. Our health care is so much higher than the entire world. So, and we get less for it. And Obamacare, unfortunately, isn't going to fix all of those problems because it is a quasi-private insurance plan that is very conservative and often helps insurance companies. It's a big giveaway to insurance companies. And that's essentially what it is. And it also does happen to help regular people while making insurance companies quite rich. So that's what it is. Now, this money, it's not as if this money would be wasted. This would be used to create jobs and repair our infrastructure and combat these huge levels of income inequality. And that helps not just us, but also helps rich people too. So in the end, everybody wins, except for a very, very few at the very top, which is right now, they're winning everything. But in the long run, they lose, and so does America. So we have to change these levels of income inequality. So I love how Sanders is just saying, you know what, fuck it, tax the rich, go balls to the wall, 90%. And I think in the case that it is right now, and knowing, I would support that as a short term, let's combat income inequality, let's go and repair our infrastructure, and then once that's done, we can lower it a little bit. But right now, revenue is what's needed most, and jobs are what's needed most, and infrastructure is what's needed most. And let's get it done. And that's why I hope Sanders can win.